much, Jeremy. Otherwise, because otherwise I'd have forgotten to press the button. So I've now done it, thank goodness. Right. Thank you very much, Jeremy. I appreciate you reminding me. Grant, sorry, still more people coming into the waiting room. This is always the bit at the beginning when we're trying to get everybody in. There we go. And I don't want to do too much until everybody's here. But nevertheless, we are a Yekka congregation, which means that we try to start on time. Okay, here we go. So our three guests this morning are, in order of how you're going to hear them, Rabbi Galit Cohen-Kedem, and I'll tell you a little bit more about Galit just before she speaks with us. And she is in Holon, south of Tel Aviv, which of course has been very significant in the past couple of weeks. And I'm sure we'll hear about that, but I'll tell you a bit more in a moment. And then Hani Elfar, who is on the staff of the Leo Baeck Education Center, one of the community center leaders in various different ways. Again, I'll mention a little bit more about him, as indeed will Benjy. And we really appreciate you being with us, Hani, because it is wonderful also for us to hear a perspective, an Arab perspective, as well as a Jewish citizen of Israel perspective. So now,
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. And then we will also hear from Ittay Flescher. And Ittay has been here to Britain a few times, and especially at Limud, where he impressed enormously with the organization that he runs in Jerusalem called Kids4peace. It's really very special. We'll hear a bit more about it. And in a way, I think Ittay is here also as a coexistence voice as well. But we will hear more from Ittay a little bit later. He also did a session just now at the World Union for Progressive Judaism that many of us found very impressive and really lovely that you're here. So let's get going. Each of our guests is going to speak for 10 minutes. And then what we're going to do is we are going to open up for questions and discussion. And a lovely thing with this synagogue is our discussion is always respectful. We hear each other as much as we ask questions. But what's beautiful about our speakers is anything goes, ask what you need. That's the point of this. That is why we are doing it. Hani is in Haifa, Galit is in Holon, Ittay is in Jerusalem, and I think some of us are still of an age where we think it's quite incredible that we're all having a conversation together at the same time. And Benjy Maor from Leo Baeck Education Center is also in Haifa, and he's just going to help us have it with a bit of context later. So first of all, let me bring forward Rabbi Galit Cohen-Kedem. So Galit, I got to know from when I was at Aleph Synagogue, where we began to create a partnership with her congregation in Holon, south of Tel Aviv, the Holon Reform Jewish community, which has an extraordinary reach in Holon, well beyond those who simply come to synagogue, that's for sure. And it was really lovely to get to know her. And then I moved to Edgware and Hendon, and I really haven't spoken to her since. However, last week I was aware that she gave a sermon at Aleph Synagogue, which you may hear a little bit more because the circumstances in which it was given were quite extraordinary. But Galit, as one of the Israeli rabbis ordained in Israel, ordained by the Hebrew Union College, part of a whole new breed of what's happening with Israeli Reform Judaism. Sorry to make you represent everybody in that way, but Galit, can I please hand over to you for your 10 minutes with us? Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Mark. When you visited in Israel, there is one story about you that still resonates in our congregation. Oh, he looks worried, but you shouldn't be. It's wonderful. When you came over for a Shabbat meal after services, which are very chaotic because we have so many children running around, you said to me, well, it's within a walking distance from Tel Aviv. And I said, well, it's not really a walking distance from Tel Aviv because we are southeast of Tel Aviv. He said, oh no, I actually walked it from Tel Aviv. So, so you are the rabbi to be remembered here walking to our congregation from Tel Aviv. And it's quite remarkable, and we still think about that often. So very nice to meet you all. Shavua Tov. Good, have a wonderful week. I'm speaking here after, I guess, almost 10 days of feeling that yet again the fragile coexistence and the fragile attempt to live in this crazy situation where there's so many different opinions, so many different stories, so many different narratives in one area. And I just want to bring you a small, maybe a few pictures or a few anecdotes from Holon, from where I work and where I live and raise my children. So I was born in the United States. We moved to Israel when I was 6. So it sounds like I'm a little American, but really I'm not, especially when it comes to my manners. I'm definitely completely Israeli. And 11 years ago, my husband and I moved to Holon, his homeland town, where he grew up. And we started a congregation, a Kehilla here in Holon. And it's a little bit like Frank Sinatra sang, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. Because when people hear that there is a Reform congregation in Holon, sometimes they're like, really, Holon? Because Holon is in many ways quintessential Israel. And I will put a little asterisk to that because we do not have an Arab community in Holon. And I think that is where I want to begin this discussion. Israelis living in Holon are Jews, Jews from different flavors, but they are all Jews. And we do border with Jaffa, which is a mixed city. But really, aside from that, you can live your life in Holon and barely hear any Arabic or meet anyone who is Arabic native speaker. And I would say that unlike maybe other Reform congregations, our congregation is also very diverse politically. We have the whole spectrum of opinions on Israeli politics and in economics. I'm very proud of that, by the way, because I find that we are very much reflecting Israeli society. In many ways, if you see how people vote in Holon, you can get a picture of what it's like, what the vote in Israel in general is. So really, when we talk about conflict and when we talk about this kind of operation, which I think for political reasons, we don't call it war, but it is a war all over again, right? And when we have this tension go up, usually it's in the outskirts of Israel. It's on the borders, and we are affected by it because people go to reserve duty or their children serve in the army, and it's something you read about, and it's something you're exposed to on the news. But this current situation and several ones before hit home, so to speak, because the rockets from Gaza were also heard and felt and fell here in Holon. So we were in a situation where children and families that don't usually see themselves as people who choose to live in a place for an ideological reason, right? It's just because this is home and it's center of Israel and it's just off Tel Aviv. So it's, it's the safe place, so to speak, right? I'm putting it in parentheses. All of a sudden there were sirens and school was off, kindergartens were off, and we had to spend quite, again, relatively speaking, right? Long nights in the bomb shelters and in areas that are supposedly more secure against rockets. But really, the story isn't about the fact that my 5-year-old woke me up 3 o'clock in the morning this morning and said, "Mom, quick, we have to run to the bomb shelter." There was a motorcycle outside that was going very quickly, and the noise of the motorcycle reminded him of the siren. So he woke me up, even though there's a ceasefire and we're all, and things are calmed down. He woke me up and said, "Quick, let's run." So this is after a week, right? So you can imagine the feeling of the post-trauma for a child, right? That every noise makes them jump and feel that they have to be alert and they have to be vigilant and they have to run for shelter. I cannot imagine, and I have friends and family that have been living like this for years. But for Holon, this is abnormal. This is not how usually things are. But aside from the trauma and the fear of this conflict, and so many of the parents, the younger parents in my community, were called into reserve duty, I think what was and what still is what provokes the most anxiety is the fact that as time goes by, this ambiguity and this the fact that there is no political solution has caused this level of I sometimes feel it very I can feel it in my senses. There's this overriding sense of fear from the other, and so little opportunity to really get to know each other and really understand each other's narratives. Different groups in Israeli society, but mainly I'd like to talk about the Israeli and Palestinian conflict. And I think in that sense, because there is so much fear and so little knowledge, and I would say ignorance of the other, and the other's wishes and dreams and fears. This is really transformed into strong, I would say, it's a fertile land to have racist remarks, notions, a high level of ignorance, as I mentioned before. And I find it, as a rabbi and educator, difficult, more and more difficult throughout the years, to even start a conversation about something that is so sensitive and so raw. You know what I mean? It's something that you know not to bring up at a dinner table. How do we understand the Palestinian narrative? How do we understand terrorism? How do we talk about coexistence? How do we refer to common or clashing dreams and hopes for this land and for this country? And Holon, our congregation, we do not have a sanctuary, we do not have a shul, but we have a school and we have 3 kindergartens. We have over 200 students ages 3 through 12 in our community. And it puts a lot of emphasis on education. And every time I try to bring up the idea of maybe we should teach Arabic in our classes, it is so interesting to see the reactions of the parents. Of course, the kids wouldn't mind because the kids are just simply curious and are open, right? But the parents become very, very emotional about this, right? And then this conversation begins. Why Arabic? They should know English. English will come in more handy. Maybe they should start English in 1st grade or in age 3 and not wait till they're older kids, right? It'll serve them better, right? It tells you a lot about the identity, right? First, we need to know English, and then maybe just, it's nice to have to know Arabic. I can tell you about different opportunities. I've tried to have tours or walks or just visiting even areas in Jerusalem, right? The capital of Israel. You can see the fear and the sense of walking into an unknown land and not feeling safe enough to bring their children to meet this. I even started a pilot of 10 families. I said, let's just find 10 families in the congregation that are willing to meet on a regular basis with 10 families from Jaffa. Wow, it's been so difficult. And by the time we got these families on both sides from both groups together, it was COVID, and that went out the window. So I just feel that on so many levels, our job here as liberal Jews, as Reform Jews in Israel, is really to find new ways to bring this dialogue and to bring it from I think you can relate to this because this is what you do in Reform communities in the diaspora and in London. You speak about coexistence and about fighting racism from a Jewish ethics point of view. And I think this is what we're trying to do. It's not from a political, it's not like a governmental political issue. It's a Jewish ideal. It's a Jewish mitzvah. It's Jewish ethics to have these conversations going and starting them not necessarily from our comfortable areas of people that are naturally inclined to this kind of political or cultural work. So I spoke about fear, and I spoke about how this fear has been really extremely difficult to work through. And this fear, unfortunately, is back as the main player in this recent conflict. But I also maybe want to just mention that when it comes down to even trying to find the silver lining, if there is, to this recent deterioration, it's really 2 things that I noticed actually coming from the business or the non-educational part of Israel. And I'm talking about a very big organization, I would call it a company that does life insurance. And this life insurance company, and I'm sure Benjy and Ittay and Hani have noticed this, has decided to go on a new campaign saying that the best life insurance you can get is coexistence. And these are huge campaigns throughout the main highways in the Tel Aviv area, which I love. And I think just like we talk about environmental changes, we have to start talking about why we need this for our own good. This is not just doing the right thing or being nice. This is our life insurance. And our life insurance has to start with education. So I'm very much inspired by the Leo Baeck Center in this area and in other areas. But I also definitely feel that we have still so much more to do. Thank you for this. This is the ad that I was talking about. We have so much more to do, and we're committed to doing this. We're very much committed to doing this. This is our life. This is what will make our presence here worthwhile. This is how I see it. Thank you for this time, Rabbi Mark.
So thank you so much, Galit. Thank you so much for what you've shared with us. And of course, we'll come to discussion a bit later on, and people can, of course, bring up what you said. But also, so interesting to see that poster and what you just said about this ethical issue and how does it work, and is it life insurance? One, extraordinary. Thank you so much. So let me now move to Hani Elfar. So Hani is in Haifa. And I'm going to go first of all to Benjy Maor, Leo Baeck Education Center in Haifa, just kind of explain a little bit about some of their work. But Hani is the director of the Clore Shared Existence of the Leo Baeck Education Center, which is located in the mixed Arab, Jewish, Christian and Muslim Wadi El-J'mal Hayam area of Haifa. And we look forward to hearing to you in a moment, Hani, but first of all, let's go to Benjy.
Thanks, Rabbi Mark, and it's a pleasure to be here with everybody. Just a reminder for those of you who remember, the Leo Baeck Education Center exists to inspire Israelis to live their lives according to three key values: liberal, pluralistic, reform expression of Judaism, tikkun olam and social justice, and Israel being a shared society, multicultural for all its residents. And what's unique about Leo Baeck is that we comprise a school, 2,400 students, a progressive synagogue, and also a community center. To get directly to the topic, one of the things that makes us a Jewish institution is the fact that we have non-Jewish students, community activists, staff, and we believe it is because of our Jewish values. And stemming back from the fact that 36 times in the Bible, we're told we're strangers, we know what it was like. And so we have to accept the stranger as a citizen and love the stranger. And in the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel, it talks about equality of all our residents. So we have to make that happen. And by having non-Jews as part of our community, that's part of the way we do that. This round, as you all know, excluding 4 missiles that were shot, rockets that were shot last week, Haifa was exempt from the terror or the violence coming from the Hamas. However, the violence that and the crack that opened up between Jews and Arabs in Israel did affect us in Haifa. And at this point, I'm going to turn over to Hani, who will talk about himself. I'm moved and honored that the person representing Leo Baeck here happens to be one of the non-Jewish members of our staff.
Thank you, Hani. We look forward to hearing from you.
Okay, so I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be with you and to share my belief and my vision regarding the city of Haifa and the issue of coexistence and peace and tolerance in the lovely city called Haifa. First of all, I am Hani Elfar. I am Arab. I am Christian. I belong to the Greek Orthodox Church in Haifa. It is the second largest church community in Haifa with 15,000 inhabitants, Christians, Orthodox in the city of Haifa. Well, Haifa is the third largest city in the state of Israel with 280,000, the total of the inhabitants. Among them, 42,000 are Arabs. The majority of the city of Haifa are Christian. 65% of the Arabs in Haifa are Christians. And of course, I belong to the Christians community. Well, 35% of the Arabs are Muslims. So Haifa really it's an island of sanity, and it already stood all the area, all the periods of the crisis or the relationship between Jews and Arabs and between Israel and its countries or its neighbors right away. Beginning from the crisis, from the wars, and etc., etc. Jews and Arabs lived together since the last 100 years ago. So the good relationship between Jews and Arabs started by the mayor of the city of Haifa. It was, well, his name is Hassan Bey Shukri. He was a Muslim. He was a Turkish. He was appointed by the Turkish authorities to be the mayor of the city of Haifa. He was really a great man, and he appointed two deputies, one Jewish, and one Christian. And he, with his two deputies, did a lot in order to reserve and in order to keep the good relationship between all the nations. I think it's very, very important. And all the mayors after this guy, after Hassan Bey Shukri, really did try to imitate his courage regarding what's going to be in Haifa. So, and Haifa become really a model how people can find the way how to live together regardless difficulties and stereo thinking, etc., etc. So the issue here, why Haifa? Haifa, all the people here in Haifa are live together. Well, you have to know, when I am Hani, I am live, for example, yes, in an area called the Allenby Road, and in my building there are 34 families, half Jews and half Arabs. Among the Arabs, there are Christian and Muslims, and among the Jewish, we have several backgrounds of Jewish from Morocco, from Romania, etc., etc. So this fact of living together is very, very important to create or to continue good relationship between the people. So it's, and this relationship really, as I mentioned, it stood all the period. I remember missiles that came out to the city of Haifa 2007 from the terror Hezbollah, and they sent a lot of missiles. One of them, well, besides my building. So after these missiles, the terrorist Hezbollah, he called to the Arabs to move from Haifa to because he is going to give more missiles to the city of Haifa. This fact brought Jews and Arabs to be more tight and more closely to each other. So etc., etc. So what's happened lastly? I think it was the first time that the Arabs feel fear in what's happened regarding the relationship between Jews and Arabs. So I think it is the first time that Jewish and Arabs from outside the city of Haifa came to disturb, or came from outside the city of Haifa to especially to the common surroundings like Wadi El-J'mal, Hayam. It's a typical of mixed surrounding that their Jews and Arabs live together, Christians and Muslims, where my community center is located there, the Clore Center, that with a lot of activities we're running there in this important, it is a part of the educational center. I think, what happened in this surrounding and what happened in the road Allenby, where I live, it was amazing. Jewish groups, mainly young people who came outside from the city of Haifa and come to Hayam and come to the Allenby Road and just attack Arabs. As really, it was a violent behavior. Well, it is the first time that happened in the city of Haifa. And of course, it was very, very fear. But we were very, very happy, especially the Hayam surrounding, that the Jewish neighbors, especially the rabbi of the Jewish community, they stood out and called for all the abrechim to go to the streets and push out all the Jewish young that came to the city to Hayam. Well, the same in my road. So as you see here, it's very, very well. We took the first initiative. We in the Leo Baeck Education Center to arrange this standing with calling for peace and in different phrases that call for peace, and the Jews and Arabs are not refused to be enemy, and we are going to continue together. And after, well, it is the second day of the war. Maybe we can say it like that. And after that, well, all the people in Haifa and outside of Haifa will adopt this standing. And really, it was a very, very feeling, because after that, at 12 o'clock, the Jewish group will come to this road and enter to the neighborhood of Hayam. I think that what happened in the last week will give us more challenge to make more activities and more plans regarding what's going on. One of the things that we the Leo Baeck Education Center, we arrange it a week before all what happens here, an iftar. It's a breaking fast, a very, very important event. And we arrange it for all the communities, Jews, Arab, Christians, and Muslims. Although Muslims are just 20% of the community here, but we believe to give the respect for all the people. As you can see here, Jews and Arabs, 12 religious leaders participated in this important event. And of course, a lot of events we arranged with our activists. We have really dozens of activists, Jews and Arab, Christians and Muslims, together with the Leo Baeck Education Center, because I think all of us see the vision of the Leo Baeck Education Center to educate toward tolerance, to educate toward democracy and humanity. I think all these things, it's really reality. It's a common with what's happened or ought to be happening in the city of Haifa. Well, I have to mention in every path, in every speech, to me that the sentence that is said by Sami Michael. Sami Michael, he is a Jewish author. He came from from Iraq, and he used to say that Haifa is the capital of the peace in the Middle East. I think this happened. What's happened to us It's going to be just away, and we are going to continue with the Leo Baeck Education Center to enlarge our activities and to enlarge all things that bring peace and bring tolerance to our area. Thank you.
Thank you. Shukran, Hani. We really, really appreciate you speaking with us. And I suspect for many of us, it's really something to hear such a positive view and a view of communities coming together to help and to support each other. That feels a wonderful thing for us to hear. So as you also saw, by the way, when you saw the picture of the iftar, you've got to go visit Leo Baeck Center. It's right by the Mediterranean, the most extraordinary view, but that's another story. Now, our final speaker who's going to speak with us and bring us another perspective, this time from Jerusalem, from Yerushalayim, Ittay Flescher. And Ittay was recommended that we got in contact by Emma, who you can see there, because of the strength of what he said at Limud about Kids4peace and a very strong program for coexistence that he runs. So Ittay, can I please now hand over to you? And we look forward to hearing your perspective from Jerusalem.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone. And I just wanted to say, I know there's been a lot of anti-Semitism in London in the last few weeks. And just for anyone that's been experiencing that, obviously I'm thinking of you and hoping that you're well at this time. And also to thank all of my friends from abroad that reached out to me in Jerusalem over the past months to check on me. I really appreciate that. So a little bit about myself and Kids4peace. So as you can hear from my accent, I grew up in Australia and I now work in Jerusalem as the Jerusalem correspondent for an Australian Jewish news site called +61J, and I've been writing there for the past 3 years. And I'm also the Education Director of Kids4peace, together with my 2 Palestinian colleagues, Anlam Hussein and Tuma Kawasmi. And the past week or the past 2 weeks, if I had to summarize it, I think this headline that I saw in Yediot Achronot, a very widely read newspaper in Israel, really summarizes how people, at least Jewish Israelis, have been experiencing this war. And the first headline says Praot Tashpa, and the second says Tilim al Israel. So it's talking about riots, and it's got the date of the Hebrew year. And the second one is rockets on Israel. And I know around the world, perhaps, that a lot of attention was given to the rockets, and I'm sure you're all familiar with that story, but perhaps less attention was given to what was happening within the country. And if I had to sort of choose 2 images that I found most disturbing, I guess, from this week, the first was an image from Bat Yam, where a group of Jews who was angry at Hamas firing rockets at Israel found a random Arab man and pulled him out of his car and literally beat him almost to death. Thankfully, he didn't die, but beat him to death, to almost an inch of his life, because he was an Arab. That's it. That's the only thing that they found that was wrong with him, and they were smashing Arab stores and that sort of thing. And in addition to this being a horrific hate crime, what troubled me most is that the object that they were beating him with was an Israeli flag. And then in Lod, there was this image of burnt synagogues, of Arabs who burned synagogues in order to express their hatred of certain Jewish groups in Lod. And you can see a man here carrying a Torah scroll outside of that synagogue. And again, a horrific thing to see that in modern Israel, we would have a burning synagogue. On the other hand, since the war, as Galit mentioned from Holon, there have been initiatives promoting coexistence, like this sign from Harel. And there was also the Cellcom company, which is the company that I have my mobile phone with, producing this ad talking about the importance of standing with the Arab society at this time, and speaking out again against extremism and against, you can see the signs here that the Cellcom staff were holding, say, Yehudim v'Aravim mesarvim liot oivim, Jews and Arabs refuse to be enemies. And while I was very moved by that, it's important to acknowledge that not everyone was moved by that. In fact, the religious Zionism party leader, Bezalel Smotrich, actually called for Israelis to disconnect their phones from Cellcom because of this message. And also the B'nai Akiva youth movement also issued a statement against Cellcom for having a move towards coexistence. So this, you know, while the three of us on this call might agree with that, it's unfortunately, there's a real struggle going on in this country about against movements like ours that believe in tolerance and dialogue. So to come to Jerusalem, you know, initially I know Rabbi Galit talked about Holon being quintessential Israel, and maybe I'll disagree with you and say I think Jerusalem is quintessential Israel, and I'll say why. Because no city in the country has the demographics of the entire region, as in from the river to the sea, as much as Jerusalem. So Jerusalem has the same Haredi population as the rest of the country, the same Arab or Palestinian, and also Jewish population as well. Not exactly, but much closer than any other mixed cities. And that's probably why, unlike Haifa, no one calls Jerusalem the capital of peace. I hope they will one day, but we still have a long way to go there. But we obviously have a lot of challenge, and this war didn't start 2 weeks ago for us. There's been clashes in Jerusalem really from the start of Ramadan that in many ways have been the match that ignited so much of what happened in the rest of the country. And the organization where I work is called Kids4peace. And the purpose of our organization is to empower youth. We work with 12 to 16-year-olds to create more peaceful communities wherever they reside. We don't define peace. Everyone who comes to Kids4peace can define peace differently. And we have a range of things that we do, from weekly programs to olive harvests. We have trips to Belfast where we learn about the conflict in Northern Ireland between the Catholics and Protestants, seeing what we can learn about that to our city. We go to Washington, D.C. to talk to Congress. We do a youth action program, leadership training, Model UN. We run parents groups as well, where really many parents who live in Jerusalem might not meet someone from the other side if not for our parents groups. And our office since August 2020 is located in a neighborhood called Sheikh Jarrah, which is a neighborhood I'm guessing a number of you have heard of recently, because it's a neighborhood that's very much in the news. And the Sheikh Jarrah is about 10 minutes from the old city. If you ride the light rail, it's about 3 stops from the Damascus Gate. And I work there together with Sumukh Wasmi, who is one of the residents who lives in Sheikh Jarrah, who is currently facing eviction. In about 2 weeks, she'll find out whether she's going to be evicted from her home or not. This is in the Supreme Court at the moment. And so for Suma, it's been incredibly difficult to work in Kids4peace for the last, she's worked with us for the last 4 years, but especially in the last few months, where there's constant demonstrations outside her home between the settler groups that support the eviction and Itamar Ben-Gvir that comes there and calls for these Palestinians to be removed, and Palestinian protesters, and also some solidarity activists from around the world who are against the eviction of these families. And while all of this is going on, also in Sheikh Jarrah throughout Ramadan, like in Haifa, like Hani was talking about, we were also running iftar meals in our office. This is a kilometer away from where these families were going to be removed. And you can see there our Israeli Palestinian teenagers from East and West Jerusalem. We ran dialogues about what was going on in the city, about the violence on TikTok, about Damascus Gate, about Al-Aqsa. All of these issues are issues that come up in our programs. And then we also ate food together because we all love to eat kosher food, halal food. The idea was for the kids really to have an opportunity to experience, I guess, an island of normalcy, an oasis of peace in Sheikh Jarrah, which is anything but a peaceful neighborhood. And then the last thing I want to share that I also went to in my capacity as a journalist was I went to the Old City last Wednesday for an organization called Women Wage Peace, where over 500 women from across the country really surrounded the Old City walls with the signs of peace and coexistence in Hebrew and Arabic, sending a message that we want Jerusalem to be seen as a city of peace and a city of tolerance. Are we successful? We've got a long, long way to go, but as they say, if I quote some Torah Rabbi Mark, they say, Lo alecha amlacha ligmor velo ata ben chorin libatel mimena. the task is not yours to complete, but neither are you free to desist from it. And we keep working, inshallah, hoping for better days in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ittay. And so look, we've heard three different perspectives, although obviously all perspectives of hope and perspectives of hope for peace and ways to do so. We've heard about some of the new realities in Israel and some of the new challenges that are happening. And what I'd love to do now is to open up for discussion, for questions, for comments, anything. In order to be able to do that, what I'm going to do is to make sure that we can feel very free to speak, is I'm going to stop the recording now so that you won't be recorded with your question. So I'm going to stop the recording right now.